Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello and welcome to another great episode here at IT Pro TV. I'm Wes Bryan and we got a great show in store for you today. Yeah, we are coming at you with more of the customer service skills for techies, and joining us back in the studios is Mrs. Jo Peacock. Jo, how are we doing today?
Absolutely great, thank you. I nearly called you Zach there, but I won't. I promise. And he leaves. I'm fine, thank you, Wes. How are you?
That's right, I'm doing great. So we've been talking about things like, some of those essential skills when it comes to communication, and that's kind of where we left it in the last one. We went into another part here. So what are we going to talk about in this episode?
Well, funnily enough, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence today, and emotional intelligence is the effect it's the awareness, the self-awareness that you have about the effect that you have on other people, funnily enough. So there we go.
So we've started this episode off great.
One really well, didn't we?
That's right.
Yeah. So yes, we're going to take a look at emotional intelligence and how that will actually affect how you interact with your users and with your customers, and how it can affect and improve every single interaction that you have. So what do you know about emotional intelligence? It's not something, it tends to be a word that's bandied around quite a lot, but I wonder how many people actually know what it means.
I have never passed this term around. I have to tell you, without looking at your information that you've got for us already, I don't know a first thing that I've ever actually heard that definition, or that term, I should say.
Have you ever been concerned about the way that you've said something and how it's affected other people?
Most definitely, sure. We on a daily basis.
Do people's reactions ever catch you by surprise?
Yes, they do. Yeah,
Right.
and that could be for better or worse. Oh, wow, that was great, or maybe I should have watched how I said something, So both ways.
Emotional intelligence is really about understanding, other people's reactions and other people's potential reactions, and how they will react to certain things that you might say or certain things that you might do. And I can give you some perfect examples of this, because one of the things that I had to demonstrate, and in fact anybody will, when I moved to another country, and so I am aware, I'm very, very consciously aware that the way that our culture is back in the UK, back in England, and the way that sort of, Europeans behave is very, very different to the way that Americans behave, and the way that Americans have, or react to certain situations. And so emotional intelligence is understanding that I actually behave and react in a completely different way to certain things than you do.
Most definitely.
And it's not just about the words that we use. We think about culture, and we think about the words that we use. And in fact, just in between episodes here, we were just having a laugh about different words that we use. And is that one considered to be a swear word in the UK? Yes, it is.
It's one of those things. We are practicing what we're saying here. We want to be culturally aware.
Right. And so we talk about being culturally aware, but culturally aware is just one part of this.
Interesting.
Because what I have to do is I have to be aware of the effect that I'm having on absolutely everybody. So it is the effect of my behavior on everyone else. If we've got one person that comes into our office that's feeling a little bit down and that's feeling a little bit depressed, it brings everybody down, right?
It's a cascading effect. I've seen
Right.
it. Yeah, definitely.
And that's emotional intelligence. That really is the understanding of that one person, that if I walk into the office and I'm feeling down, that I'm going to have a negative effect on everybody else. But it's also the emotional intelligence of us to recognize that that person is feeling down, but that doesn't necessarily have to bring us down. And in fact, us maintaining a positive attitude could actually have a pacifying effect on that person. I saw something interesting the other day, actually. You ever watch Winnie the Pooh?
Oh, God, I love Winnie the Pooh. Christopher Robin.
Yeah. So I was watching the Winnie the Pooh movie, the latest one. I think it's got Ewan McGregor.
Oh yeah.
I like Ewan McGregor, but anyway, it's got Ewan McGregor in there, and I was watching Eeyore, and then I saw a quote a couple of days later, and it said something along the lines of, "The wonderful thing about Eeyore is that no matter how down and depressed he may be, his friends still want him along without any expectations."
That's right.
Right. That's emotional intelligence. Being aware of somebody else and being aware of how they are, but also being aware that our influence might have a positive effect on that person and that we shouldn't exclude that person just because they have slightly different demeanor to us.
Let me bring in an analogy here, all right? And we got to be careful, again, with our terms to make sure that everybody understands. It almost sounds like customer service analyst is like a coach. All right, I think of like, for instance, growing up and, doing Little League Baseball. Our coach, we'd have one player in there that wasn't having a good day.
What's Little League Baseball?
Little League Baseball, it's just for kids, right? It's baseball as you're going up before you're in high school and college baseball and stuff.
Right.
We have those little leagues, which is implying kids, right?
Right.
And the coaches, obviously coaches would be, they'd have 10 to 15 kids, and they were talking children that could be anywhere from 5 years old on up to like 12 years old,
Okay.
right? So that if one of the players came in and maybe they had a rough spot at school that day or maybe a rough spot at home, right? The coaches would know that we gotta help that one kid, because ultimately that kid's going to be on the field and they're going to be part of our team, and their emotions right now where they stand are going to not ruin, but are going to have a negative effect on all the teams.
Yeah.
So are you saying that we should maybe be customer service analyst coaches when it comes to solving problems, or are these more on an interpersonal relationship basis?
It's a bit of both.
It's
to be
both,
perfectly
okay.
honest. It's a bit of both, because you see, if we are aware of how we are as a team, all I need is one person to walk into the service desk in a bit of a mood, right? A bit of a grumpy mood, or maybe a little bit. Remember we talked
I've
about
been
Grumpy
that person
Bob,
before.
right?
Yeah,
in a
I've been that
previous
person
episode.
before, sure.
So if we have one person that comes in who's not very happy or who's sort of feeling down, then that's going to have a negative effect on absolutely everybody. So it potentially could. So it is up to every other service desk analyst to ensure that, yes, we respect that person's feeling down, but nevertheless, we need to try and remain positive, because that's going to affect our individual one-to-one sort of interpersonal relationships with all of our customers and our users as well. So we have to still maintain, it's having that intelligence to be aware that we have to still maintain a positive attitude, whilst at the same time acknowledging and nurturing the person that is not feeling great at that point in time. So this is not about ignoring him completely and saying, do you know what, you're feeling miserable, well, never mind, get over it. This is actually about saying, well, no, we want to be positive, and we want to try and encourage you, but we also have to be positive because we're dealing with customers and users, and we have to maintain a positive attitude in that particular relationship as well. So emotional intelligence, we describe it as the ability to perceive emotion and understand emotion. All those words, emotion, it's really difficult to use a description there that's got the word emotion in when we're talking about emotions. It's awful. It's like when I said to you, in a previous episode about respect.
Sure.
Yeah,
it's so hard to define it without putting the definition or the word in the definition.
What I'm looking for, though, actually, is the word that's at the very end of the first line up there, and that's the word regulate. It's about regulating our emotions and regulating our effect on other people. Because our emotions can either have a negative or a positive effect on other people. How we react can have a negative or a positive effect on other people. And so maturity in our emotional intelligence, in the way that we deal with our emotions, is really based on self-awareness, self-regulation. I shouldn't need anybody else to tell me that I'm being really miserable and I'm being sort of, not very nice to people. It's based on social skills. Social skills, remember the interpersonal skills that we were talking about in previous episodes. Remember we talked about empathy. But it's also based on self-motivation as well. It's about really emotional intelligence is about the effect that our emotions and that our feelings have on other people. And that includes self-motivation. Have you ever heard the phrase, pull your socks up?
Yes.
It doesn't translate very well, does it, to other languages? But you've heard the phrase, pull your socks up.
Sure.
Right. And, I've heard that a lot in my too long career. I've heard that a lot. And I've heard that, from a personal level as well. You hear people say that. I hear parents say that to kids all the time. You better pull your socks up. What does that mean?
I have no clue.
Right.
I've heard it, but I've never used it in context.
Yeah. And it could well mean something along the lines of just suck it up and see.
Oh,
sort of
okay,
thing.
sure. Yeah.
You need to pull your socks up. And I hear another phrase over here quite a lot, and I'm not too sure whether this is appropriate or not. So we may need to cut this bit out, but hey, we should be all right. I've heard something along the lines of you need to put your big girl panties on.
Yes, we
Right?
have. But wear your big pants, and that means act like a grown-up. And
Right,
it means,
and that's pretty
and
much exactly the same thing.
Translates to the same thing. It means it's time to suck it up.
Right. Yep. Exactly
Yep.
the same thing. Is that motivational?
I don't know. It definitely motivates me to, come to work dressed.
Okay then.
But the point is,
For that,
yes.
I'm internally grateful. I just want to say that right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, is that motivational? If I said to you, right, you
No.
need to put on your big boy pants.
It really doesn't. Actually, it kind of sounds condescending. Like maybe you're telling me I can't handle the current situation, or maybe I'm not reacting to it right. So I
Right.
just need to get over it, move on.
Yeah, so we're talking about self-motivation here. We're not talking necessarily about motivating others. But if you have got somebody in your team who's feeling a little bit down, then your reaction of, well, you just need to get on with it is not going to help at all. And it's the same, you can't tell yourself that you just need to get on with it as well. Now, that's an interesting thought, because if you're feeling a little bit down, it's going to have an effect on the interactions that you have with your customers and your users. And I have heard a lot of schools of thought that have said things like, well, you just need to give yourself a stern talking to. Has that ever worked?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's never worked. I can honestly say that I've never really come across an instance where that has worked. Give yourself a stern talking to. We don't need you to give yourself a stern talking to. If you want to maintain that positive attitude and therefore get a positive reaction from other people, trust me, other people know when you're faking it. We all know when you're putting it on, when you're not really as positive as you should be, or as positive as you need to be in that particular role. So motivation and self-motivation is not just about giving yourself a stern talking to. It's about understanding why you feel demotivated, why you feel demoralized, and then identifying what you can do about it. Not just accept it and move on, but what can I do about this? This is how I feel. What can I do about it? And we want you to be aware of how you feel, because that will have a positive or negative impact on your effect on other people. Your thinking, Wes.
I'm listening. Go ahead.
I see the cogs whirring.
That's right.
So this encompasses both sort of interpersonal intelligence and intrapersonal intelligence. So that's intelligence in a way that interpersonal is between you and I, and intrapersonal is being aware of the fact. In an earlier episode, we talked about the difference between, a one-to-one conversation and a conversation where I am talking to 500 people. That's my intrapersonal intelligence. Remember, we talked slightly about whether one person, what you need in terms of confidence in order to be able to go and speak to 500 people. And I said, well, you need exactly the same communication skills as you do as talking to one person.
Sure.
And you do. You need exactly the same communication skills. However, you still need to be aware of your effect on 500 people. I've stood in front of many a classroom, and so have you. We've stood in front of many a classroom. And what's one of the kind of the golden rules about training?
I don't know. I'm going to rely on you, because I'm drawing a blank on this one. Because I know you want a specific answer, and I'm not sure that I have it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See, he's right. He knows me too well. Yeah. One of our golden rules really about training is to understand who your audience is, right?
Okay.
But then be aware of what your audience is doing.
Mm.
If my audience is sitting here, my audience is doing this, how much notice are they paying?
They're
me?
distracted, and chances are they don't even really value
Or if they're
what you're
doing
saying.
this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The email's more important than your presentation.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What about if they're doing this?
Oh, yeah. That means they didn't get enough sleep, or you're boring them to death. Or they're not even interested.
But whose responsibility is it to do something about that?
You.
That's mine.
As the presenter.
Right.
We've said, It's,
as
as a communicator, it's our responsibility.
Exactly. So it is my responsibility then to have the emotional intelligence, or rather the intrapersonal emotional intelligence, to know what effect I am having on everybody in the room. It's my responsibility. So it's exactly the same for you. It is your responsibility to understand, to be aware of the effect of your actions on everybody in the room. And therefore, you should be aware when somebody's not listening to you. I can tell when somebody's eyes are glazing over, and at that point in time, I'm going to stop talking. Like Wes is right now.
And when it comes down to it, I mean, if eyes are glazing over, are they even understanding or even listening? You know, I mean, understanding, I guess listening comes before understanding, because you have to be able to hear things before you can actually consume it and apply it and make it applicable. But if I'm not even listening to you at all, well then, yeah, you're going to get the glossy effect.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So let's talk about then maturity in emotional intelligence. And I've got a few bullet points here. You know, maturity doesn't mean how old you are. Oh, and boy, how many times do I hear that misconception as well, or that misperception, as it were? Maturity is not about how old you are. It's about how well developed you are, and that sounds really awful as well. But it is. It's about how well developed you are to perform your role, or within your particular role in life. It's not just about your role at work, but your role in life as well. So as far as emotional intelligence is concerned, if you're demonstrating a maturity in emotional intelligence, and I'm not going to read through all of these, by the way, but you're demonstrating all of these. And I want to bring your attention to sort of the third one down, which is understanding that book smart is not enough. I have met, and I don't know about you, I have come across so many people that have come straight out of universities and they think they know absolutely everything. Well, yes, you do, about a certain subject, but it doesn't mean that you're able to talk to people. And I'm not talking about sort of university graduates here. I've got one of them at home. Thank you very much. But what I'm talking about are, people that think that because we read a book, then that means that I am an expert in certain things. Or because I can pass a test, then I must be an expert. In order to develop, in order to demonstrate emotional intelligence, it's not just about reading how to do it in a book. You have to be able to practice it as well. Now, I also want to bring your attention to alternative views as well. So seeking alternative views, again, that is something that as a customer service analyst, that's something that is part of your role, is to seek the opinions and the views of your customers and of your users as well. So that is something that is really part of that role, in addition to any technical skills that you may have, and in addition to all of the communication principles that we've talked about too. And then we talk about tolerance and resilience and pragmatism and being practical. Would you say that you were a positive person or a negative person?
I can sometimes lean more towards the pessimistic side.
Right.
I have been. I know a lot of times I'll exude that I'm a positive person, but I'm definitely more prone to the pessimistic side of something's got to be wrong rather than something actually being right first. That's where I move first.
So I am very much a pragmatist. I look at things and, Wes knows me well enough to know that I will say exactly what I think, and I will tell you exactly what it is right now. And so I'm very much a pragmatist as well. But emotional intelligence is just being able to answer that question. And I wonder how many of you can actually answer that question. Do you know whether you're an optimistic person? Do you know whether you're a pragmatist? Or perhaps you tend towards the negative? Because you see, if you are self-aware, and I'm not talking about other people's opinions of you, I'm talking about if you are self-aware, then maybe if you want to change it, you can do something about that. If you want to change your impact on other people, then maybe you can do something about it. But you have to have the emotional intelligence to be aware that that's who you are. That is one of your first steps, is to work out what sort of person you are. And then we get into the approachability and the self-confidence and the humor. And I know that if we look at those sort of last 3 bullet points on that particular slide, I know that that's not something that comes naturally to everybody. However, these are also techniques, certainly when it comes to humor, for instance, that you can use to maintain a positive interaction with your users. Now, let's go back to a previous episode where I asked Wes whether we can learn interpersonal skills. Can you learn to be confident? Can you learn to be approachable? Can you learn to be funny?
Self-confidence, I think after time, the reason I say I believe you can learn self-confidence in some ways is because I did have a friend that used to say that, if you're learning something and maybe you're not the expert in it now, just walk like you do understand it if you have that understanding.
Right.
So he was trying to teach self-confidence as a teacher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, one of the things that we really have, at our fingertips here in the US, which is not quite so prevalent elsewhere in the world, is that we do have a wealth of sort of, self-help sort of studies and coaches that can help with this. And so I would always say to people, I would always recommend people that if there is something that you are struggling with, then your first step is to recognize that it's something that you want to change. And then, yes, you can seek out assistance with that. Now, it's not necessarily going to resolve everything overnight, by the way. You're not going to change overnight, but nevertheless, it's something that, you can work to change. And that's about control as well, controlling your emotional intelligence. Now, in this particular slide, we talk about controlling a conversation here. Well, that's something, again, that you need to be able to do as a service desk analyst, but it's also about controlling your reaction, or rather other people's reactions to you. If you can control other people's reactions to you, if you can control that conversation, then that demonstrates very mature emotional intelligence. So we use little techniques, and they're very, very simple things, like referring to the other person by name. It shows that you respect them. It shows a respect, and it also shows that you care about that person. And we talk about empathy and having that positive demeanor. And I know that we have spent time in previous episodes talking about smiling. Simple as that. The change in your tone of voice when you smile is huge. But asking questions, eliciting feedback, it's that two-way conversation that shows that you value their opinion. And once we move from control, then we can move into influencing. Once you've gained that respect, then we can move into influencing. And influencing within emotional intelligence is about influencing the reaction of that other person. So we talk about things like taking time to understand that culture, taking time to understand their language, showing respect. But then also, you mentioned this word in a previous episode, didn't you, Wes? Humility.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah? Showing a humility, a respect for the fact that other people have got different skills.
That's right.
Everybody's got different skills, but that doesn't make any one of us any better than anybody else. We just all have different skills. And that's why we should recognize other people's perspectives, recognize their achievements. And yeah, if you feel it appropriate, then compliment. I can honestly say that if I give you a compliment, then it's genuinely meant, because I'm not the sort of person that compliments people all that much. I'm more of and I think that's because I'm more of a pragmatist. But again, I recognize that in myself. So I will tell you what I think. And if I say that something looks nice, or I say that actually that well done, then I genuinely mean it, because to be perfectly honest, you're not going to hear that too often from me. Wes is just laughing at this point in time.
That's right.
Now, the next tip there for influencing is to keep the message simple. Remember what we talked about in previous episodes about relevance?
The relevance and the dangers of over-communication.
Right, yeah. Don't pad out your conversation.
It seems like it introduces complexity, into the conversation, a complexity that's not meant to be there. Because if they're coming to you as customer support, you need to make a complex topic not so complex.
Well, also your message is lost. And if you're trying to influence, then what you're trying to say and what you're trying to get that other person to do is lost right in the middle of all of that conversation. So don't pad something out. We need to be, we need to show empathy to that person, but we need to try and keep everything as simple as possible. So we don't want to show sympathy. We don't want to spend too long on the phone. Oh, there. Yeah, we want to show empathy, but we want to keep our message simple and to the point, clear, concise, and unambiguous. And the next one, don't use words or phrases that could be misunderstood or offensive. I also want to bring the word condescending in here as well. Offensive is not necessarily the first place that, I don't want you to think of the first place that your mind jumps to when I use the word offensive. This is not about swearing at somebody, but this is actually about being condescending as well. I'm incredibly offended if you condescend, if you have a condescending or an arrogant attitude. I'm incredibly offended. And it's not just about the labels that you may give to me. It's about the tone of your voice, and it's about the words that you use. So we want to be as open and as calm as possible. And again, I mentioned tone of voice, as it says there. Be alert for body language. Be alert for tone of voice. You can tell, even if you're on the other end of the phone, if you're reading an email, I can tell if somebody is getting annoyed with me. Well, I can tell. But now the intelligence part is doing something about it. There's a difference between emotional awareness and emotional intelligence. And the emotional awareness is about being aware of who you are and aware of what effect you're having. But emotional intelligence is about actually doing something about it. And then we talk about, appearing relaxed and don't rush the conversation. Have you ever thought that maybe sometimes you speak too fast?
Yes, I have. Yep, or just, again, just from an impatience.
Right.
An impatient standpoint. I'm rushing the conversation because I'm impatient with the person. So now I'm trying to rush them through the conversation. So I'm just hoping I can get off of the phone with that impatient person.
But what happens if the person on the other end of the phone is not necessarily, maybe English is a second language, is not quite understanding what you're saying?
They're going to have a very bad experience. I mean, perceived experience.
Right. And they're also going to not really understand what it is you wanted them to do. So it's not just about the bad experience. It's also about the fact that you could make the situation 100 times worse, because they could go away and take a different action to the action that you'd asked them to take because they didn't quite hear you or they didn't quite understand. So we have to be very conscious when we're communicating of how we are communicating. And of course, the other downside to trying to rush the conversation, and I don't mean talking too fast, but if you appear as though you're trying to get off the phone or you're trying to end an email string too quickly, then it looks as though you don't value that
You
particular
never really
conversation.
cared for the opinion or the problem that they had, and certainly not showing any compassion or empathy.
Right, and there wasn't any sort of priority based on their particular, on their particular issue, their particular problem. So lastly, while we're talking about emotional intelligence, I just want to touch on another word that we haven't really used up until now, and that's the word patience. Now, I have said you can't teach somebody to be patient. No, you can't teach somebody to be patient. But what we can do is we can give you the tools, we can give you techniques, we can help you, we can encourage you to nurture your own patience. But we can't actually teach you to be patient. You have to nurture that yourself. So we do have some sort of, tips for you. Things like don't take things personally. That's easier said than done, isn't it?
Oh, really? I take a lot of things personal when they should not be taken personal at all. They were never meant that way. And it's interesting that when you mention that to the person, I really took that personally. And they're like, really? You should have told me about that. That wasn't meant to be personal. And now I feel like not an idiot, but I feel like I wasn't doing my part in the communication because I should have at least made that person aware of that.
Right, yeah.
So I'm just as guilty.
I am the first person, I will admit as well, to sort of taking things personally. And you think to yourself, oh, that hurt. And then when you actually mention something to that person a little bit later on and say, well, I really took that personally. Oh, well, I didn't mean you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I took it like that.
Yes.
And the thing is, and this is the point I'm trying to make about emotional intelligence, if the person at the other side of the conversation has taken it badly, then you have failed to communicate. It's not that they have taken it badly, it's that you have failed to communicate. But you also need to be aware that if you have taken something personally, yes, the other person has failed to communicate. However, you shouldn't take it personally. You shouldn't react badly because they have failed to communicate. And now take deep breaths. It'll tell us here, not visible or audible that the other person can hear. I will quite often, especially if it's an email conversation, I will walk away. I will leave that email. I'll go and grab tea. I'll go and walk. I'll just do something else just for 5 minutes. Maybe have a conversation with somebody or just do something completely different for 5 minutes and then come back to it. Even when it is a priority, and this is another one where we need management support on this, even if it is a priority call, if it's a priority one that you are dealing with, you are not going to be able to resolve that problem if you're angry. You need to walk away and you need to take a breath. And like I said, we need to have management support on this one, because sometimes if you're in a stressful situation, you're dealing with a priority one issue, then sometimes that analyst needs to walk away. And it doesn't mean that they are not concentrating. It doesn't mean that they're not dealing with the issue. What it means is that you are taking the time to think about the issue calmly. And I also mentioned in the next bullet point that need to slow down well and just relax, and it goes back to that walking away. You just take the time. Sometimes it's not so easy just to walk away when you're actually having a conversation, but I have been known to say to people, look, you're probably not going to like what I'm going to say right now, so give me 5 minutes and I'll come back after I've gathered my thoughts. And that's just an excuse that you can use. You can say, I need to gather my thoughts on this. And we also want to use active listening techniques. And I don't want to talk too much about that right now, because we're going to do a whole episode on active listening techniques just a little bit later. So I'm going to invite you to come back to that particular episode where we look at active listening. So for now, as far as emotional intelligence is concerned, I hope that that actually has made you a little bit more aware of your reactions to certain situations, and also how other people react to things that you may say or that you may do as well. And when we come back in our next episode, we're going to take a break right now, but we're going to look at how we actually disagree with each other.
Oh, that should be a very fun episode. I'm sure you're going to enjoy that one. I know I'm going to enjoy that one for sure. I can't wait to see what's on our plate for that one, but I know what's on our plate for this one, and that's bringing this one to an end because we don't have any more minutes. So, Joe, thank you so much for being in the studios with us, and we always appreciate you, the viewer, watching. Signing out for IT Pro TV, I'm Wes Bryan.
And I'm Joe Peacock.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.